to have really good memory? And the answer he gave, he said, you should have desire to learn. You should have desire to learn, and that's how you'll memorize. And actually, as a matter of fact, this applies in our life. If we see, for example, when we have to study for something, we sit there and we memorize it. We put a lot of time behind it. But if somebody asks you, for example, if you're like a big cricket fan, right, and they ask you like, okay, can you list the names of all of the players of this team? You know, the person will say, yeah, of course, yeah, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Okay, this guy, how many, runs did he have? And how many, like, overs did he bowl? And how many, points did he score? The person knows it off the top of his head. He never sat there and memorized it. Did he? Did he sit there and memorize it? No, because he had so much love for it that automatically it stayed in his memory, right? So this is why Imam Bukhari rahimahullah said, listen, there's no special recipe for this. You just have to love what you want to learn, and that'll automatically come to you. So at a very young age, he was already very prominent. By the age of 16, he had traveled and he had more than 1,000 teachers, right? By the age of 16. Nowadays, people at the age of 16, what do? They're all stuck playing video games and, mashallah, chilling, right? So at a very, very young age, he was already very studious, and he had over 1,000 teachers. And he became prominent, and especially his memory was well known. And so just about his memory, one incident that we might have already heard about, but it's good for us to revise. He was a student like many other people who are students nowadays. And so he was sitting there, and he was in front of one teacher, and the teacher was narrating hadith, and everyone else was, writing the hadith down. And Bukhari, from the first day, he's not writing anything, right? So after a few days, the students, they got tired of this. They keep seeing him every day. Everyone's writing hadith. He comes, he's not writing anything, right? So one day they approached him. They said, why you're coming here? The ustad is putting so much time. He's teaching hadith. Everyone is doing a lot of effort. They're writing the hadith down. What's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you taking any notes? You're not writing anything down, right? Like, for example, in a classroom, if everybody's serious, and then there's this one guy who's like sleeping in class, using his phone, and not paying attention. And everybody at some point, they'll be like, what's wrong with you? Like, why can't you just be serious about this, right? So they approach him. They said, okay, no problem. You guys are questioning if I'm a serious student or not. He said, open your books, right? So they opened their books, and the narrator says that by this time, in 15 days, we had covered 16,000 ahadith, right? Basically, the teacher every day, he's teaching a little more than 1,000 ahadith. And so from the first hadith, he starts to recite and recite and recite, and he continues reciting all of the ahadith, right? And actually, the people that took notes, they were correcting their notes from the memory of Imam al-Bukhari. So this shows the kind of memory that he had. Another incident happened when he was going to one town. The scholars of that town, all the big guys, right? They were like, we heard so much about this Bukhari. Let's see if he's like all that. Everyone talks about him. He's such a big shot. Let's see if he's everything people say. So they welcome him. There's like lots of people that are waiting for Bukhari to come. Just like any celebrity comes anywhere, then you have like thousands of people waiting, right? The president comes there, and like so many people are waiting. So that's exactly what happened. There were so many people just waiting for Bukhari to come. We heard about this guy, Bukhari, and now all of a sudden he's in our town. So the scholars, they lined up, and as Bukhari was coming, they said they started reciting a hadith, right? So there were 10 scholars there, 10 scholars of hadith, and each scholar recited 10 ahadith. And every time the scholar narrated one hadith, Imam Bukhari would say, La a'rifu. He says, I don't know this hadith, right? And he goes to the next hadith, he says, La a'rifu. I don't know this hadith. Continuously like that, all 10 ahadith, he's saying, I don't know. Then he goes to the next guy, he also all of the ahadith says, I don't know. Now people are kind of a little disappointed. We heard so much about this guy. He memorized so many ahadith, but all of these 100 ahadith, he doesn't know any of them, right? So people are like, maybe something's wrong. Maybe we heard all these things, but maybe he's actually not all that. So Bukhari goes back to the first guy. He goes back to the first scholar of hadith. And he says, look, you narrated the hadith to me like this, with this chain, and with this text, right? This wording. But actually, I know the hadith, in this correct chain. What was actually happening is that each one of those shuyukh, in each one of those teachers, to test him, they switched around the chain of the some of the ahadith with the wording of the other ahadith, just to test, like, if he actually knows his thing, right? But Bukhari goes back to the first guy and he says, you narrated the hadith to me like this, but actually correctly it's like this. And he does this 1, 2, 3, 4 until 10, then goes to the next guy, same thing, right? And Hafiz ibn Hajar, when he narrates this incident, he says the shocking thing was not that Bukhari knew all those 100 ahadith, it's the fact that he went back and had memorized the incorrect versions as well, right? So this was the memory of Imam al-Bukhari. So there's a lot to say, and subhanallah, if we look in our, today we talk about big inventors and scientists and people that have contributed to society that were geniuses, right? Einstein, we talk about Newton's laws. MashaAllah, these are good contributions to humanity. It's also good for us to know about our own history, the kinds of geniuses that existed in our own history as well. And Bukhari is just one example. There were others that were actually much, much, much more knowledgeable than Bukhari, right? And had better memory than Imam al-Bukhari himself. So inshallah we'll read the first hadith. So as I mentioned, the sequence of this book is that initially Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he starts with the kindness to parents, and because that's the most important of all social interaction, because from our society, we have our friends, we have our neighbors, we have our employers, employees, we have all these different people, community members, etc. The most fundamental and the most important two human beings from that circle are our parents. This is number one, right? So al-Bukhari rahimahullah starts with that, and then after that he goes on to the rights of the children, the rights of the siblings, and so on and so forth. He continues like that. So we'll start inshallah with the first hadith. باب قول الله تعالى ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حسنا. وبه قال أخبرنا أبو نصر أحمد بن محمد بن الحسن بن حامد بن هارون بن عبد الجبار البخاري المعروف بابن نياسكي قراءة عليه فأقر به. قدم علينا حاجا في صفر سنة 70 و300. قال أخبرنا أبو الخير أحمد بن محمد بن جليل ابن خالد بن حريث البخاري الكرماني العبقسي البزار سنة 22 و300. قال حدثنا أبو عبد الله محمد بن إسماعيل بن إبراهيم بن المغيرة بن الأحنف الجعفي البخاري قال حدثنا أبو الوليد قال حدثنا شعبة قال الوليد بن العيزار أخبرني قال سمعت أبا عمرو الشيباني يقول حدثنا صاحب هذه الدار وأومأ بيده إلى دار عبد الله. So the narrator Abu Amr al-Shaybani says that the owner of this house, and he's pointing towards the house of Abdullah, who's a Sahabi. When we say Abdullah, without saying which Abdullah in Hadith, does anyone know which Abdullah this refers to? MashaAllah. You really know your stuff. MashaAllah. May Allah reward you and increase your knowledge. So, whenever in Hadith the word Abdullah comes, the Sahabi Abdullah comes, and it's not specified which one, always it means Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Yeah, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was a very special Sahabi. He was known as Sahibul Na'alain and Sahibul Mithara, right? Sahibul Na'alain, because he used to carry the shoes of the Prophet ﷺ. Wherever the Prophet ﷺ used to go, whenever he would take off his shoes, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would be there to carry it for him, right? This was the khidmah and the kind of respect that he had for the Prophet ﷺ. He was also Sahibul Mithara. When the Prophet ﷺ would go make istinja, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would be waiting outside with water for the Prophet ﷺ, right? And he was also known to be very, very, very extremely similar to the Prophet ﷺ in terms of his, character, in terms of his interactions. He was very similar to the Prophet ﷺ. And he was so close to the Prophet ﷺ that when people from outside Medina would come, they would think that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is part of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Because, people usually, they would have to take permission and, but he didn't have those formalities with the Prophet ﷺ. He could kind of come and go whenever he wanted. And he was so frequently there that people would confuse him for the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Why am I saying all of this? Does anyone know which Sahabi, especially the Hanafi school of law, the Hanafi madhab, does anyone know which Sahabi this madhab connects back to? It's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Ali radiallahu anhuma. These two Sahaba. So the teacher of Abu Hanifa was Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman. His teacher was Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. His teacher was Alqama. And his teacher was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. And the same place, because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he migrated to Kufa. And he spread knowledge all over Kufa. Right? In Iraq, he spread knowledge all over Kufa. Umar radiallahu anhu, he came to Kufa. And when he saw the amount of scholars there, he told Abdullah ibn Mas'ud that you have filled the skies of the horizon of Kufa with knowledge. Right? So this is the job that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud did. And his student is Imam Abu Hanifa. He taught in the same exact place, in the same masjid, in the exact same place, right? So, and he was extremely close to the Prophet ﷺ. So the narrator says that that the owner of this house, referring to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, has told me, سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, I asked the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, أي العمل أحب إلى الله عز وجل? Which action is the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now yesterday we read one hadith where the Sahabi asks, Ayyul mu'minina akmalu imanan, right? Which of the believers has the most, perfect iman? And throughout hadith, actually, you'll see these questions. The Sahabi is asking, what is the best action? One Sahabi is asking, who's the best mu'min? Who's the best amongst us? And the Prophet ﷺ in different places is giving different answers. We all notice this, right? In different ahadith, when people ask, when different Sahabi ask, what is the best good deed? What is the best action? The Prophet ﷺ is giving different answers. And the reason for this is because the Prophet ﷺ would answer questions based on the person that is asking. And he would answer questions based on the condition. At different times, the ummah has different needs, right? Throughout different periods as well, the ummah has always had different needs. There was one time when, going out in the path of Allah and fighting the enemies of Islam, that was the need of the believers. That was the need of Islam. There was one time, for example, when Hellenic Greek philosophy was translated into Arabic, and actually for those who don't know, the works of Greek philosophy that we have today, they're not translations from Greek. They're translations from Arabic. Like Plato, Aristotle, their works only survive today. I'm not making this up. They're translations from English, from Latin to English, and the Latin was actually translated from Arabic. The Muslims are the ones who actually preserved this. Right? So, in any case, when these works were being translated, a lot of people had different confusions. So who stood up to this? Imam Ghazali and others, right? So the need of the ummah at that time was to defend the aqeedah of Islam against, the attack of people from outside, right? There was a time when people started making up, inventing, fabricating hadith. And the need of the time was to preserve and collect and memorize ahadith. And so you had people like Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Imam Ahmad, and so on and so forth. Does this make sense? The ummah, the ummah has different needs at different times. Today, for example, what is the need of the ummah? There are multiple needs. But one of the biggest needs, one of the biggest reasons why the support and the help and the nusrah of Allah is not there is because we are not connected with Him. We're not connected with Him. The vast majority of Muslims, unfortunately, may Allah forgive us, but they're not very interested in the deen. They're not very connected with their deen. They're not, we all have knowledge about everything else, but where we lack in terms of knowledge is our own deen. Where we lack in knowledge is, Islam itself, right? So this kind of revival is what is needed, right? So here the Prophet ﷺ answers. He says the best action that is, most liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-salatu ala waqtiha. He says to pray salah on its given time. And the understanding of the given time is the mustahab time. As we know, every single prayer has a preferred prayer time. Throughout the time, there's mustahab times, inshallah. Which we can cover that in fiqh. When we have a fiqh class, inshallah, we can discuss this. So the mustahab time is the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Sahabi asks, Thumma ayyun. After that, which one is the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, Thumma birrul walidain. Then it is kindness to the parents, right? So, and this is what Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is extracting from, that the Prophet ﷺ said that the second most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is kindness to one's parents. And we see throughout the Quran as well that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands people to believe in Allah, and then right after that to be kind to one's parents, right? Throughout the Quran in different places. وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حُسْنًا, for example. This is also in Surah Luqman or in Surah Al-Ankabut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is uh, advising people to be kind to their parents, to the point that even if one's parents are kuffar, they're non-Muslims, still a person has to show kindness and good behavior towards one parent. Now we must ask ourselves in Islam, like philosophically, why is it so important for a person to respect and to be kind to his parents? And this is kind of based off of common sense, right? The people that spend the most energy and the people that spend the most effort behind anybody is their parents. And it's such effort that can never really be repaid, right? And if you think about it, just rationally, just logically, as a matter of fact, if you're a biologist and you look in the animal kingdom, no creature keeps their child with them for 18 years. This idea simply doesn't exist, right? It's like for birds, a lot of birds, it's a couple of weeks. It's a couple of weeks, they look after them, they make it, they don't make it, khalas, no problem. One child sometimes kills the other, khalas. You made it, no problem, right? And then after a couple of weeks, now you're on your own, right? And many animals also, few years, that's it. No animal keeps the child for 18 years, right? And especially for a desi parent, even after 18 years, you still want your kids around, right? This is the kind of love. And actually, most parents, they always want their children around. And the kind of support that is given is also, you can say, to some level, it's irrational. We would never do this for anybody else, right? Like feed them, clean their clean their feces, clean their urine. Even if the small infant urinates on us, we don't mind. Somebody else did the same thing, we would never tolerate that. But if it's the child, we feel even more love. Oh, poor kid, he did this, right? If the child gets sick, we don't mind staying awake. Anybody else knocks at our door at the middle of the night, we wouldn't take this lightly. But if the child wakes up, 4 or 5 times, we don't have a problem with it, right? So the kind of love and affection and the sacrifice, and even as a matter of fact, once you become a father, all your earning and your effort, really, you're thinking about, your family, right? You're not really thinking about yourself, that I need to have something fancy and I need to have a comfortable life. It's more about what can I give my children. I want to take them on trips. I want to give them a comfortable life. I want to be able to buy for them what they want, right? So this kind of like selfless understanding, which is absolutely irrational when it comes to anybody else, right? So because of that, and this is something that, unless you have a kid, you understand, right? If you don't have a kid, you'll never understand this. And once you have a kid, then you're like, this is what my parents went through with me, right? So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's such an emphasis that He puts on, love and kindness towards, one's parents. And the word that is used is birrul walidain. Allah could have said, ta'atul walidain. Allah could have said, for example, hubbul walidain. But the word that is there is birrul walidain. And bir is something that is very, very specific. It's a kind of, obedience that comes with love, that comes with affection, that comes with, kindness. So, number 2, this is what he says, that ثُمَّ بِرُّ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. Then the Sahabi asks, ثُمَّ أَيٌّ. After that, which, action is the most important? He says, ثُمَّ الْجِهَادُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Then it is to strive in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We went into some detail about what the path of Allah entails yesterday, so we won't repeat it, inshallah. So then he said, قال حدثني بهن ولو استزدته لزادني. He says that he told me these 3, but had I asked him for more, he would have, given me more. So we see that, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they, number 1, they had a lot of zeal to learn, because as we see in the hadith, the Sahaba are always coming and asking questions. Didn't shy away from asking questions, right? That's one thing. But also, they also kept in mind the teacher. They also kept in mind the etiquette with the teacher. He said, وَلَوْ اسْتَزَدْتُهُ لَزَادَنِي. Had I continued to ask him, he would have kept answering my question. But I kept in mind that I can't just keep nagging him and, like bothering him. Maybe at a different time I'll ask, right? But to keep that kind of etiquette in mind, this is one of the, specialties of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. That even, for example, sometimes if they knew the answer to something, let's say Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked something, they would always say Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Right? That Allah and His Messenger know better. Even though sometimes, there's a hadith in Bukhari where Abdullah ibn Umar, one time the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked about a certain tree, and Abdullah ibn Umar actually knew the answer, and he didn't answer, and he regretted that after. That, out of the entire crowd, I knew the answer and I could have said it, and the Prophet ﷺ would have noticed the fact that, I knew the answer. But their habit was to say Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Right? So this is the kind of etiquette also that they had during ta'aleem, during teaching and learning. May Allah give us the tawfiq to adopt the ways of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, learn from their etiquette, learn from their zeal for knowledge, that they're always trying to gain knowledge. There was no such thing as a jahil sahabi. We have this this class nowadays amongst Muslims, which is that you have like ulama, you have learned people, and then you have people that are not learned. Amongst the Sahaba, there were only learned people. And this is the kind of goal that we must create for ourselves as well. And inshallah, the goal is that in every single masjid, after salah, we should have hadith recitation, we should have classes of fiqh, we should have classes in aqidah. People should be learning. Every single person should have at least basic knowledge of the deen. May Allah give us the tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah, we'll have breakfast. Everyone, inshallah, is invited to participate with us.
Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, after the breakfast, we'll have the continuation of the mashwara. This is the halaqa mashwara every 3 months we have for New Jersey. So after the breakfast, inshallah, we'll continue, inshallah.